Thursday. We are live, and I'm here with my good buddy Nick. And I say good buddy because he's about to be my good buddy, but to be totally transparent with you all, Nick and I were just recently introduced, and so we really have a lot of getting to know each other, and y'all are going to see that go down. Because Nick, what I do know about him is that he's an exceptional salesperson, sales manager, and a like genius at scaling sales, which I think is something that many of my clients struggle to do. So I'm excited for this conversation, Nick. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to
Yeah.
be here. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, let's dive in. So tell just like quick background on you. What makes you such a sales badass?
So I came through traffic and funnels, which I imagine a lot of people watching this like are familiar with traffic and funnels. Chris Evans, Taylor Welch. I was on their sales team. I started as an appointment setter. I did 5 million in sales as a personal producer there in the 2 years that I was there. So I was doing like 250K a month while I was there, just personal production. And then I ultimately worked my way into management where I was leading the outbound setting team. Since then, I left them in 2021, mid 2022. My business partner and I, David, kind of teamed up and started Win It Sales together. He really founded the company. I was employee number one. And now we're 2 years into that business. And we run 10 sales teams that have 50 salespeople that are doing between $2 and $3 million a month.
Amazing. I am so excited for this because I think your journey kind of overviews, at least from my experience, and I'm curious to see if it's different for you, what most entrepreneurs that I know really struggle with, which is that they work really hard to become exceptional at sales, and they become exceptional salespeople, and then they
Yeah.
really struggle with ultimately handing that hat off and stepping out of the closer role and into just like pure sales management. Like I know, a multi 7-figure, almost 8-figure CEO who will still hop into his Slack sales channel and be like, all right, who's got a hot lead? Let me close them. Like, or I'll hop on a call with you, right? Like, even though he's got this huge sales team, he's
Yeah.
unable to really step out of the role. So I'm curious, is that something you see a lot on your end as well?
Oh, I mean, the hardest transition is getting the owner out and getting like that first closer to be validated, if you will.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. And like, I won't lie, we failed helping people try to do that many times. And we've also had success doing it. So I think it's one of the hardest things in business is building a sales team that doesn't involve the owner. I also do love to see an owner that likes being involved in the sales team and is happy to help out and like jump on calls and get deals over the line. Now, I don't want the owners to be dependent on doing that. That's
Right.
obviously the goal.
Right.
But a positive sales CEO is like, it's very healthy for the business. So,
Okay. So you said you've had successes, you've had failures. What do you
yeah.
think are like the key differentiating factors between a success versus a failure when it comes to like really building out a sales team?
That's a good question. I look at like the success of a sales team and it's like, there's 4 pillars. It's the marketing aspect. If the marketing isn't there, right? Like good product market fit, good offer, good messaging, solid lead gen, the economics of the funnels make sense. If that's not there, a sales team isn't going to solve that problem for you, right? Second thing is systems and processes, right? Like if you do not have a process that's simple and clear and makes sense and fits well with your offer and fits well with your avatar, and you don't have systems that support that, sales team is not going to, like, salespeople are not going to fix that. The third thing is training, right? Like the actual development of the people. How do we get people in? How do we train them? What does the day-to-day management look like? What does the day-to-day leadership look like? And then point number 4 is the actual people in the seats. So I think the ones where we've failed in that, 1 through 3 haven't been that great, and we've been naive of like, oh, we'll just find a person and hope that it works. But it's like, it just doesn't work like that. And the ones where we've been successful, like the business owners understand that those 1 through 3 are like very key in making sure that a sales team actually performs.
Yeah. Okay. That's absolutely huge. So, bringing this into my scope a little bit, I want to touch on like number 2. You say like systems and processes. Say more about like what do you mean by that, and how would somebody know like, yes, I do have that, I've checked that box, or no, I still have work to do there?
So I mean, I look at the acquisition process, right? So the acquisition process is how do we turn a stranger into a paying client? There's a marketing aspect to that, and there's a sales aspect to that. Okay, so what is the lead gen process? After the lead is generated, what is the process to turn that into a conversation? What is that conversation? What are we actually doing, right? Like, what does that conversation framework look like? After we turn that lead into a conversation, how do we turn that conversation into a sales opportunity? And then what does that sales conversation look like? And then ultimately, after you enroll them, right, what does that enrollment process look like? And for our industry, right, that is a pretty standard. And then all of the stuff in between, right? Like, what's the follow-up process on leads when we don't get in touch with them? When you do set an appointment with a closer, or you take, you know, you start a conversation that turns into an opportunity, what does that handoff process look like from setter to closer? So all of those steps of the way, and it's lead gen to conversation to opportunity created to opportunity converted. And those are really the four main steps. And there's going to be different nuances in each of those processes that you need to look at and have clearly documented. And it's like, it's black and white. When this happens, we do this. When this happens, we do this.
And there's two components to like why that is so essential. Number one is like repeatability, right? A CEO will always be forced back into the sales role if their closers can't follow a repeatable process, because then it just requires, it's just reactivity, right? Like, and flying by the seat of your pants. And in my opinion, I don't think most CEOs I know would be willing to hand off something like that. When it comes to the second component of this, and that is like efficiency. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Nick, but I've seen so many inefficient marketing and sales processes where leads are just like leaking out of the funnel, and they are leaking out of the sales process because there aren't systems to capture them, follow up with them consistently, etc. And you just leave a sales team like running around like crazy, working really, really hard, but ultimately being like a fraction as productive.
100%. So I think there's two aspects to that, right? Like, one, what is the standard of how many times we're going to contact the lead, right? Like, what does that cadence look like? New lead is generated. We call them 2 times in the morning, 2 times in the evening, 2 times on day 2, 2 times on day 3, 1 time on day 4, 1 time on day 5. If you haven't even defined that as the standard, and you don't have like the lists and the trainings to support that and train someone on that, right? Like, where do I find the day 1 leads in the CRM? So it's one, it's defining that, and it's having the actual system to support it with lists in a CRM or whatever. The second thing is like, let your automation work for you. We have email sequences and text sequences that we're enrolling automatically and manually enrolling people into that are just constantly working, right? And if you have that stuff working, it's going to create opportunities for you. And inbound texts and inbound emails are going to show up in your salespeople's inbox, and they're going to have low-hanging fruit there. That's just on new leads and how you should be working those. Then I see like after it's set with a closer, right? And the deal doesn't close, oftentimes it's just like, well, they're dead forever and we're never going to follow up. Best of luck, right? Like, so that's just silly in my opinion. I think that is more of like training and management. Yes, on systems as well. How is your pipeline set up? What buckets do we put these people into? Again, what follow-up sequences do we have? How have we trained them on the task system in the CRM? How have we trained them just as a salesperson to identify like what is the next step in the sales process to actually move them closer to buying? What barrier do they have? Do they need a piece of content? Is it a trust thing and they need to see more testimonials? Is it a lack of belief and we need to give them like a mindset training? Like whatever it is, we need marketing assets to support that. And then also it's just like the day-to-day management and QC that a sales manager should be doing, right? I go into the CRM and my team goes in the CRM often, and it's like, dude, if you didn't call this lead within the time that we've set and the standard that we've set, it's like, why? And you got to call people out on that, right? And you just need to train them. And that's the repetition and like the nitty gritty of sales management that most business owners just don't want to do. from what I
It's
see.
just like not sexy. It's not nearly as sexy as just like picking up the phone and just calling that person and closing them.
Yeah, it's not sexy, but you literally have to do it because you can have all the systems in the world and like, I don't know, maybe you and I don't see eye to eye on this, but like to me, I can have 10 out of 10 systems with 4 out of 10 management and people, and like the systems aren't saving my life, right? Like I'd rather have 8 out of 10 systems or even 7.5 out of 10 systems and processes, and like everything. Once I get up to an 8 out of 10, the rest of my energy goes into people development and people management.
You know, actually, I think I do agree with you on that, which is like in my mind, the role of systems aren't important in and of themselves. They are only there to allow your people to do their absolute best work, right?
Yes.
You are enabling your closer to just do what they do best, which is pick up the phone and close.
Yes.
If all of their leads are sitting in their CRM with the right
Right.
follow-up and the pre-call messaging and everything's just laid out for them. That's
Exactly.
maximizing their talent. And then as a manager, like pour into the talent because that's going to be the deal breaker between whether or not that person actually moves forward.
100%. 100%. Yeah, systems will only get you so far, right? Like,
yeah.
And again, the hardest thing is building a sales team, and sales team is a lot about people development. I don't want people to, what's the word, interpret that as you can have dog shit systems and then put an A player average in place and they're just going to crush it. That's not the case, right? Like you need both for sure. It's just at some point there's diminishing returns and improving your systems, and you could take that energy into people development, and it's probably a bigger leverage point at that like 8 out of 10, which is obviously subjective, but
I agree. The 80-20 for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that is for getting that very first closer in place, having a repeatable system that closer is now able to go through. What, if anything, Nick, do you see changing as you scale beyond a single closer and you're now really building out a sales team? Like what new action items or behaviors get introduced with one closer versus many?
There's definitely like a cultural aspect there, right? I have a veteran closer who's been here for a while. Naturally, those people are a little more jaded, right? Just like the server in a restaurant who's been there for 10 years, they can be like a toxic cancer to the culture of the team, right?
That's interesting.
Right? Like the leads are bad. Oh, the marketing sucks. Oh, these people are poor, right? Like that doesn't happen until with a new closer, until an existing closer plants those thoughts in their brain.
That's interesting.
From what I've seen. So trying to like, and I don't want to neglect the reality of like lead quality and like some people don't have money and like all of that, but I don't want to support the external blame that salespeople put on their results, right? So culture is, it's a big conversation, right? It's a big hairy thing that is very vague and, just subjective. But I think that comes into play. And then ultimately just like interpersonal relationships between people that you have to manage. Sometimes people won't like each other. Sometimes people won't work well with each other. Sometimes people won't communicate well with each other. And like as the sales manager, you need to kind of facilitate those relationships on the team.
Super interesting. So what is the fix to this kind of like jaded veteran closer? Like, is there even just a couple of tacticals you could share of like these things could work, or is it just like in general just have a great sales culture?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it starts with how you even market the role, right? When you're recruiting for new people. I want to market the role, and I really want to kind of communicate our core values and how we operate and who we are, and this is how we show up, and this is the way we do things. When I'm generating recruiting leads and recruiting applications, and I think it starts there. Then you reinforce that on day one through your onboarding and your training, and then you further reinforce that with how you actually show up every day. As far as like a veteran kind of being toxic. Ultimately, like the long-term solution for that is usually going to be trimming them off of the team if it's a repetitive thing. But before that, you have to replace their production and their personal production, which is a really complicated problem that I haven't personally been able to solve predictably yet. We're working on it. And I'm just being honest with you, right? Like that is the hardest thing.
Replacing your top performer.
Yeah, because you don't want to let them go and hurt the business before you replace their production. So it's like it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Because you need to give them opportunity, and you want to develop someone to produce at the level that they're producing. But maybe you don't have enough calls coming in or enough leads coming in to feed them enough, the new person enough opportunity to develop fast enough to replace their production. So it's a tough dance. And you kind of just need to make contextual, subjective decisions. But if you can market roles properly with the right standards, with the right core values, and you can reinforce that throughout the recruiting process and the training process and the day-to-day of being in the team, and you as the manager, you reinforce that, and that's how you show up, that's the best way to get your people behind it.
I'm totally with you on that, because I think it ultimately comes down to, like, I mean, okay, think of a good sales process, right? What does a good sales process do? It sets correct and appropriate expectations. And so if in the job description and in the interview and hiring process, you're painting this to be just like the most incredible sales opportunity, you're just overflowing and perfectly qualified inbound leads all the time, and that's why you should come work with us, they'll sign up to work with you. But then 3 months in, 6 months in, 12 months in, they're going to quit, or they're going to become that jaded person because what you sold them on is actually out of alignment and not represented in the expectations. And so making sure that those expectations are set from the beginning, culturally as well, core values as well, and then held consistent. It's like a client relationship. Like, how do you keep a client happy for a long time? You set and then maintain and deliver on appropriate expectations.
Yeah. I look at recruiting like I look at sales and marketing. It's the same exact thing, right? Like your offer, you define an avatar who's your ideal candidate. You structure an offer that you feel like will be good for them. You create messaging around that offer that ideally will get their attention and want them to want to talk to you. And then you have a lead generation process and an appointment setting process and a sales process. And then ultimately when they get in, you have a fulfillment process. And if what you sold on the front end is misaligned with what you're fulfilling on the back end, bad things are going to happen. Your refund rate's going to go up. Your churn rate's going to go up. It's going to make your life a lot harder.
Yep. And the cost of mishiring a salesperson, I learned this recently, Nick, is on average 5x their annual salary, right?
Yeah.
So just because it's not just the cost of, hiring that person, training that person, pouring into that person, it's the opportunity cost of all of the leads that they don't close that the right closer would have brought into your business. All of that revenue is missed when you have the wrong person in the role. So it's actually super expensive to get it wrong.
100%. But it's super valuable to get it right. So I'm willing to get it wrong on the sales side, because when you find that right person, I look like we have CLV, customer lifetime value. There's also RLV, rep lifetime value. A good rep will make you $2 million plus a year. I'm willing to take some gambles, but yes, when you get them in, there needs to be a standard of ramp up, and you need to understand that you are kind of gambling ad spend, right? And again, with the sales and marketing and the recruiting and onboarding and training and retention mirror, right? I'll spend $1,500 on a new ad campaign to test it and see how it works out. Why wouldn't I throw $2,500 on someone's new calendar to test them, right? And there is the opportunity cost, right? So it's the balance of, you have to test people, and you're never going to know until they're in there and they're actually doing the thing. But you have to have standards and a process and decision-making process of, okay, how long do we test someone? Just like you probably have on your media buying side and your marketing side.
Sure. I love that mindset. Okay, last question for you, Nick. Is it ever appropriate for a CEO to jump back into sales and become a salesperson?
Full-time? Hell no. No. I mean, and I hate giving black and white statements.
Sure.
What's the situation? Why would they be doing that? Is it like an ego move because they like it and they're good at it? Or is
That's
it like,
most often what I see is they just miss it, right? And they just want to always have sales calls on their calendar.
in that case, yes, that's probably the wrong thing to do. But I want to know, what does the business need? And ultimately, the CEO is the main servant of the business, right? From what I see. And if they're doing sales or doing anything, right, just to serve themselves personally and not the business, I think that's the wrong move. But if it's like, dude, we just lost our top closer and we have 2 guys that are underperforming and we need some cash in the door and we don't trust these guys to do it, it might be the right move.
Sure.
You know? So I think it's contextual.
Yeah. Always, it depends.
Yeah.
Amazing. This is such a valuable conversation, Nick. I really, really appreciate it. Anything that I didn't think to ask that you think is a highly valuable question to answer?
No, I think that was good. Like, I think people overcomplicate building a sales team, right? Just oversimplify it. You need 4 things. You need those 4 pillars. You need marketing. You need systems. You need training management. You need people, right? If you don't have those 4 things, it's not going to work. And then once they get in, like, focus on the freaking data, right? Have a target, set projections, reverse engineer those projections. The way that we look at it is like, we have a revenue target. Let's say it's 500K a month. The average sale is 10K. We need 50 sales a month. If we close at 25%, we need to take 200 calls. If our show rate is 67%, we need to have 300 calls on the calendar in a month. How many leads do we need to generate to get 300 calls? How many dials do we need to make? How many DMs do we need to send? And if you don't have that clearly every month, like broken down by month to week to day, and you're not measuring that every single day, you're not going to be successful building a sales team.
Amen. I love it. Nick, thank you so much for having this conversation. This was absolutely badass. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, tune in next week. See y'all later. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
See you guys.